don't even know where to begin with this, so I guess I'll just start by saying, don't do what I did. Like, seriously, just don't. I know that's the kind of warning that makes people even more curious, but trust me on this one, you're better off watching cat videos or doom-scrolling TikTok than going down the rabbit hole I did. It started pretty innocently, or at least as innocently as these things can. I've always been one of those people who gets hooked on weird internet stories, you know, those 15 creepiest things found on Google Maps videos, or Reddit threads where someone claims they accidentally got a pizza delivered to an abandoned house and then the delivery guy never came back. Stuff like that. So, naturally, I got curious about the dark web. I had no real reason to go digging into it. It wasn't like I was looking to buy drugs or hire a hitman or whatever crazy stuff people say is out there. I think I just wanted to see it for myself. I mean, how bad could it really be? Spoiler, worse than you think. I won't go into detail about how I accessed it, mostly because I don't want to give anyone ideas, but also because I don't think I even fully understood what I was doing. I watched a couple of YouTube tutorials, downloaded some sketchy software, and within an hour I was staring at a screen that looked straight out of a hacker movie. Green text, black background, you know the vibe. At first it was underwhelming. Most of the links I found were either dead or just boring forums filled with people arguing about crypto or trading stolen Netflix accounts. I was about to give up and chalk the whole thing up as a waste of time when I stumbled across a site called the Red Letterbox. It didn't look like much. The homepage was just a plain red background with a single line of text. Want to see the truth? Leave your mark. Beneath it was a box where you could type something, and then a button that said Submit. Here's where I should have stopped. I mean, seriously, who just types their info into random boxes on the dark web? Me, apparently. I didn't put anything personal in there. Just my first name and the city I live in, which for the record is Minneapolis. I figured it was some kind of weird mailing list or ARG or whatever, so I hit submit and moved on. The next day, I forgot all about it. Life went on as usual. Work, Netflix, doom-scrolling Twitter, the usual stuff. Then 3 days later, I came home to find an envelope sitting on my front porch. There was no return address, just my first name written in shaky, almost childlike handwriting across the front. I'd like to say I was creeped out right away, but honestly, I thought it was some kind of prank. Maybe my friends messing with me, or even a neighbor dropping off a late Christmas card or something. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded into thirds. The handwriting was just as shaky as the name on the front, but the message was clear. Kill me, please, I beg you, that's it. No explanation, no context, just those 5 words. At first I laughed, like, what else was I supposed to do? It was so ridiculous it almost felt like a joke. But the more I stared at the note, the more uneasy I felt. Who would send something like this, and why me? I checked the envelope again, hoping for some kind of clue, but there was nothing. No return address, no postmark, nothing. It wasn't even sealed. It was just tucked closed, like someone had walked up to my house and left it there by hand. I tried to brush it off, but something about it stuck with me. All night, I kept replaying the moment I found it, trying to figure out how someone even knew where I lived. Did they follow me home? Was it because of that stupid site I visited? The next morning, I called one of my friends. Let's call him Mike. Mike's one of those tech-savvy guys who knows everything about computers and hacking and all that, so I figured if anyone could explain this, it'd be him. Wait, hold up, he said, when I told him about the red letterbox. You typed your real name and city into a dark website. Are you insane? I felt like an idiot. I didn't think it was a big deal. It was just my first name, not my address or anything. Mike sighed. Dude, you have no idea how easy it is to track someone down with just that. Especially if it's someone who knows what they're doing. He tried to reassure me, telling me it was probably just some troll trying to scare me, but I could tell even he was uneasy. He told me to change all my passwords, uninstall the software I'd used to access the dark web, and maybe think about getting some security cameras for my house, just in case. I wish I could say that was the end of it. That I followed Mike's advice, laughed about it a week later, and moved on with my life. But the next night, things got worse. Way worse. It was about 1 a.m., and I was lying in bed scrolling through Instagram when I heard it. A single knock at my front door. Not a doorbell, not a loud pounding, just one knock. I froze. Who the hell knocks on someone's door at 1 a.m.? My first thought was that it was some drunk guy who got the wrong house. But then I remembered the letter. I stayed completely still, straining to hear anything else. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then came the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, and getting farther away. I crept to my window and peeked out through the blinds, but the street was empty. No cars, no people, nothing. When I finally worked up the courage to check the porch, my stomach dropped. There was another envelope. This one wasn't handwritten. The words were cut out from magazines, like some kind of ransom note from a bad crime movie. It said, "It's not a joke. Help me. You're the only one who can." I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I spent hours pacing my living room, my mind racing with 100 different scenarios. I kept telling myself this was just some elaborate prank, a neighbor with a twisted sense of humor, or maybe even one of my friends trying to mess with me. But every time I glanced at that second letter sitting on my coffee table, I felt like I was being watched. The message kept repeating in my head, "It's not a joke. Help me. You're the only one who can." By the time the sun came up, I was so tired I felt physically sick. I ended up calling in sick to work, which I never do. I mean, I work at a call center. It's not glamorous, but it's stable. But there was no way I could focus on answering angry customer complaints about internet outages when my brain was stuck on the weird, terrifying mess happening at home. Mike called me around noon to check in. I told him about the second letter, and there was this long, awkward pause on the other end of the line. "Listen," he said finally, his voice lower than usual. "I don't want to freak you out, but this isn't normal, like at all. Whoever this is, they're putting effort into this. The handwritten letter, the cut-out ransom-style message, that takes time. It's not just some teenager messing around." I already knew that, but hearing him say it out loud made my stomach twist. "Should I go to the police?" I asked. "Yeah," Mike said immediately. "Bring the letters. Maybe they can trace it, or at least patrol your neighborhood." I wanted to believe that was the right move, but something in the pit of my stomach told me it wouldn't be that easy. Still, I packed the 2 envelopes into a folder, grabbed my keys, and headed to the nearest police station. The officer at the front desk couldn't have been less interested. I showed him the letters, explained how they just showed up at my house, and he gave me this bored, half-hearted shrug, like I'd just told him my Wi-Fi was down. "Looks like a prank," he said. "Maybe some neighborhood kids messing with you." I tried to push back, pointing out how specific the messages were and the fact that someone had to know where I lived to leave them, but he just nodded like he was humoring me. He took down my information and said they'd look into it, but I left the station knowing nothing was going to happen. I spent the rest of the day triple-checking the locks on my doors and windows. I even pushed a chair up under the doorknob of my front door, just like I used to do in my college dorm whenever I felt unsafe. By the time night rolled around, I was so exhausted I almost felt numb. I decided to crash on the couch in my living room instead of my bedroom. I don't know why, but something about being able to see the front door made me feel safer. Like if something happened, I'd have a chance to stop it. I left the TV on, playing random YouTube videos to drown out the silence. For a while, it actually worked. I started to relax, even drifted off for a bit. But then, at exactly 3:11 a.m., I woke up. It wasn't a sound that woke me, it was a feeling. You know that weird sense of awareness you get when someone's staring at you? That's what it was. My heart was racing before I even opened my eyes. The TV was still on, casting just enough light across the room for me to see that nothing looked out of place. The front door was still locked, the chair still wedged beneath the knob, but the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it got stronger. And then I heard it, scratching. It was faint, so faint I almost convinced myself it was just the wind. But as I sat completely still, holding my breath, it got louder, more deliberate. It wasn't coming from the door, it was coming from the living room window. The blinds were closed, but the sound was unmistakable. Someone or something was dragging their nails across the glass, slow and deliberate, like they were trying to get my attention. I wanted to scream, but I was frozen. My phone was on the coffee table just a few feet away, but it might as well have been on the other side of the planet. All I could do was sit there, staring at the blinds as the scratching grew louder. And then it stopped. For a second, everything was silent again. I thought maybe whoever, or whatever it was, had left. But then the blinds moved, just a little. Just enough for me to see the silhouette of a face pressed up against the glass. I bolted for my phone, grabbed it, and dialed 911 with shaking hands. The operator picked up immediately, but I couldn't even get a full sentence out. I was babbling, trying to explain that someone was outside my house, when the scratching started again, this time on the back door. "Please, just send someone," I begged. The operator assured me that officers were on their way, but even with the reassurance, I couldn't stop shaking. I didn't feel safe staying in the living room, so I locked myself in the bathroom and sat with my back against the door, clutching my phone like a lifeline. It felt like hours before I heard the knock at the front door. This time, it wasn't a single knock. It was loud and urgent, followed by a voice shouting, "Police!" I ran to the door and opened it just enough to see two officers standing on my porch. I immediately let them in, spilling out everything that had just happened as they swept the house. But they didn't find anything. No footprints, no fingerprints, no sign that anyone had been outside. Even the blinds looked undisturbed. "It's possible someone was here," one of the officers said, "but there's no way to confirm it. Keep your doors and windows locked and call us if anything else happens." I nodded, but deep down I knew that wasn't the end of it. Whoever, or whatever, was messing with me wasn't done. I could feel it. Sure enough, when the officers left, I found something they'd missed. Sitting on the back porch just outside the sliding glass door was another envelope. This one was different. The words weren't cut out from magazines or written in shaky handwriting. It was a printed photograph of me, taken from outside my living room window. When I saw the photo, my blood ran cold. It was me, sitting on my couch in the living room, staring blankly at the TV. The angle was unmistakable. It had been taken through the living room window while I was asleep. I hadn't noticed the flash, hadn't heard a camera click, hadn't felt anything. The person who took this photo had been inside my yard, standing just a few feet away from me while I slept, and now I was holding proof of it. I slammed the sliding glass door shut and locked it, even though I already knew it wouldn't help. Whoever was doing this had no problem getting close without me knowing. I looked at the photo again, hoping for some kind of clue, and that's when I noticed the detail that made my stomach turn even more. There was a reflection in the glass of the window, faint, but definitely there. It wasn't just me in the photo. There was someone standing outside, right where the photo had been taken. A shadowy figure wearing what looked like a hood, their face hidden in the darkness. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, but I could tell they were tall, with broad shoulders. And they were close. Way too close. I called Mike immediately. I tried to keep my voice steady, but the second he picked up, the words just came spilling out. "Dude, they took a picture of me," I said, pacing the living room. "They were in my yard. They're playing some kind of sick game and I don't know what to do." Wait, Mike said, trying to calm me down. "Who took a picture? What are you talking about?" I explained everything. The photo, the reflection, the letters. And by the end of it, I could hear the tension in Mike's voice. "Okay, this is bad," he said. "You need to leave, like, right now. Get out of the house, go somewhere public, a hotel, a Starbucks, anywhere. Just don't stay there." "Leave?" I repeated. "What about my stuff? What about my—" "Screw your stuff," Mike interrupted. "This person knows where you live. They know your name. They're messing with you in person now. This isn't some random internet creep anymore, dude. This is real." I knew he was right, but the thought of leaving my house, my safe place, felt wrong. Still, the idea of staying there another night was even worse. I grabbed my car keys, stuffed the letters and photo into my backpack, and bolted out the door without looking back. It wasn't until I was halfway to a nearby 24-hour diner that I realized how paranoid I'd become. Every car behind me looked suspicious. Every pedestrian was a potential stalker. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that hooded figure sitting in my back seat. When I got to the diner, I picked a booth in the corner with my back to the wall so I could see the entire room. It was the kind of place that felt like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. Sticky vinyl seats, a flickering neon open sign in the window, and a waitress who looked like she'd seen it all and didn't care anymore. I ordered coffee I didn't plan to drink and opened my laptop, hoping to find something that would make sense of what was happening to me. I started by Googling the red letter box, but nothing came up. No forum threads, no articles, not even a mention of it on Reddit. It was like the site didn't exist. Next, I searched for anything about similar cases, stalking, dark web harassment, cryptic letters, but most of the results were just clickbait articles or urban legends. Finally, out of pure desperation, I logged into Reddit and posted about what was happening. I figured if anyone would know what to do, it'd be the noseleap crowd, right? I gave as many details as I could without making myself sound completely insane and hit post. Then I just waited. The first few comments were the usual Reddit stuff, people calling it fake, telling me I should have never gone on the dark web, asking for proof. But then about an hour later, I got a private message from someone with the username TRLBadmin. The message was short. "You shouldn't have left your house." I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely type as I clicked on the user's profile, hoping for some kind of clue about who they were. But there was nothing. No posts, no comments, no karma. The account had been created just minutes before they sent the message. I wanted to respond, to ask what they meant, but something stopped me. Instead, I closed my laptop and looked around the diner, my heart pounding. That's when I noticed him. A man sitting in a booth near the front of the diner, partially hidden behind the menu he was pretending to read. He was wearing a dark hoodie, the hood pulled up to cover most of his face, but I could see just enough to know he was staring at me. I froze. For a few seconds I just sat there, staring back, trying to convince myself that I was imagining things. But then he moved. He didn't stand up, didn't say anything. He just lowered the menu slightly, enough for me to see his mouth curl into a slow, deliberate smile. And that's when I noticed what was sitting on the table in front of him. Another envelope. I grabbed my stuff and bolted for the door, not even bothering to pay for the coffee. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears as I ran to my car, fumbling with the keys like I was in some low-budget horror movie. When I finally got the engine started and looked back at the diner, the man was gone. I sat there for a long time, trying to catch my breath, trying to figure out what to do next. I couldn't go home, I couldn't stay at the diner, and I definitely couldn't shake the feeling that wherever I went, this guy, or whoever was behind this, would find me. Eventually I drove to a nearby Walmart parking lot, figuring it was public enough to feel safe. I parked under one of those bright, buzzing streetlights and locked the doors. For a while, I just sat there, staring at my phone, half expecting another message to pop up. When nothing happened, I finally worked up the nerve to check my backpack. The photo was still there, along with the letters, but something else was too. Something I know I didn't put in there. It was another photo. This one wasn't of me, though. It was of a house I recognized. It was Mike's. I stared at the photo of Mike's house, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. It wasn't just a random shot of his place. It was taken at night from the sidewalk, with the curtains on his living room window slightly open. I could see his TV glowing faintly inside. He was home. I knew what the photo was telling me before I even let the thought fully form. They weren't just coming for me anymore. My stomach churned as I grabbed my phone and dialed Mike. It rang twice before he picked up, his voice groggy but concerned. "Yo, what's up? It's like 3 a.m, he said, stifling a yawn. "Mike?" I could barely get the words out. "They're at your house." "What? Who's at my—" "Just listen," I snapped, clutching the phone like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. "I don't know how to explain this, but they left a picture of your house in my bag. They're watching you." There was a beat of silence. I could almost hear his brain working to process what I'd just said. "Okay, hold up," he said, his tone switching from groggy to serious. "You're telling me someone's been stalking you and now they've decided to target me too? Why the hell would they—" "I don't know, Mike," I interrupted. "But you need to get out of there, right now. Don't think, just go." For a second, I thought he was going to argue. Then I heard him moving around. Footsteps, doors opening and closing. "All right, I'm leaving," he said, his voice slightly muffled, like he was holding the phone between his ear and shoulder. "I'll call you when I'm out, okay?" "No," I said quickly. "Stay on the phone with me, please. I don't care if it kills your battery, just don't hang up." Okay, he said. I could hear his keys jingling as he grabbed them. "I'm heading out the back door. If someone's watching the front, I'm not giving them a chance to see me leave." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Good. Just get to your car and go somewhere public. Don't go home. Don't go to my place. Just stay somewhere safe." "I got it," he said. "Relax, man. I'm not dying tonight." That was the last thing Mike said before I heard the scream. It wasn't his scream, though. It was someone else's, a deep, guttural yell, so sudden and violent that I jumped, nearly dropping the phone. "Mike!" I shouted, my voice cracking. "What's going on?" For a moment, all I could hear was chaos, shuffling, something heavy hitting the ground, the sound of glass shattering. Then Mike's voice came through, panting and frantic. "They're in the house!" he yelled. "I don't know how the hell they got in, but they're in here!" My heart felt like it was about to explode. "Get out, Mike! Run!" "I'm trying!" he shouted back. I could hear his footsteps pounding against the floor, the sound of doors slamming as he tried to put space between himself and whoever was in there with him. Then his voice cut out, replaced by a loud, metallic screech. "Mike! Mike!" There was no answer. I sat there in the Walmart parking lot, staring at my phone like it might explode in my hand. The call hadn't dropped. He was still connected. But all I could hear on the other end was a strange, rhythmic sound, like metal scraping against concrete. "Mike, say something," I whispered. My voice sounded so small, so useless. The scraping noise stopped. Then so quietly I almost missed it. I heard something else. Breathing. Not Mike's. It was too slow, too deliberate. Whoever was on the other end of that line was just breathing into the phone. I felt the panic rising in my chest, threatening to choke me. "Who is this?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "What do you want?" The breathing continued for a few more seconds. Then, finally, a voice. "You should have stayed home." The line went dead. I sat there in stunned silence, staring at the call-ended screen. My mind was a mess, every thought crashing into the next. What had just happened? Was Mike okay? Who the hell was that on the phone? I tried calling him back, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried again, and again, same result. I didn't want to go to his house. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to stay far away, but I couldn't just sit there, not knowing what had happened to my best friend. Against my better judgment, I started driving. The streets were eerily quiet as I made my way to Mike's place, the glow of streetlights casting long, flickering shadows. My hands were slick with sweat, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. When I turned onto his street, my heart sank. Mike's front door was wide open. I parked a few houses down, not wanting to get too close. For a long moment I just sat there, staring at the house. It looked wrong. The windows were dark, the lawn eerily still, like the whole place had been abandoned for years instead of minutes. Finally, I worked up the courage to get out of the car. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove compartment and started toward the house, every step feeling heavier than the last. The air felt colder as I got closer, like the temperature had dropped 10 degrees. "Mike?" I called, my voice barely above a whisper. "Are you in there?" No response. Inside, the house was a wreck. Furniture was overturned, shards of glass littered the floor, and the TV in the living room was smashed, its screen a spiderweb of cracks. I stepped carefully, the beam of my flashlight sweeping across the room. "Mike?" I called again, louder this time. Still nothing. That's when I noticed it. The envelope, sitting in the middle of the coffee table. It looked just like the others, but when I picked it up I realized it was heavier. There was something inside. With trembling hands, I opened it and pulled out a single key. It was old, the kind of key you'd expect to see in some gothic horror movie with a long, rusted shaft and an ornate bow. There was a note in the envelope too, just 2 words scrawled in that same shaky handwriting. Basement. Now. I didn't want to do it. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to leave, to call the cops, to burn the damn house down if I had to. But I couldn't shake the feeling that if I didn't, I'd never see Mike again. So I went to the basement door. The key fit perfectly into the lock. I turned it, opened the door, and descended into the darkness. The basement smelled wrong. That's the first thing I noticed when I opened the door. The air was damp and heavy like wet soil, but there was something else mixed in. Something metallic and sour that hit the back of my throat and made my stomach churn. The flashlight beam trembled as I stepped onto the creaking wooden stairs, each step groaning under my weight. The faint hum of the house's electricity was gone, leaving nothing but silence and the echo of my own breathing. I wanted to turn back. I needed to turn back. But every time I thought about running, I pictured Mike. I couldn't abandon him, not after what I'd dragged him into. So I kept going, one step at a time, until the basement swallowed me whole. The room at the bottom was bigger than I'd expected, the walls made of cracked concrete that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. My flashlight struggled to cut through the darkness, its beam barely illuminating the edges of the room. There were no windows, just the endless dark. "Mike?" I called, my voice barely above a whisper. Nothing. The only thing in the room was a single wooden chair sitting in the center like some kind of sick centerpiece. And someone was sitting in it. For a moment I thought it was Mike. The shape of the body, the messy hair, it looked like him. But as I stepped closer, the flashlight trembling in my hand, I realized something was wrong. His head was tilted at an unnatural angle, his chin resting against his chest. His arms were hanging limply at his sides, tied to the chair with thick, frayed rope. His clothes were covered in dark stains, and I didn't need to get any closer to know what it was. "Mike," I whispered. My stomach was twisting itself into knots, and I felt like I might throw up. I forced myself to step closer, fighting the instinct to bolt. That's when I saw it. It wasn't Mike. It looked like him. Same clothes, same hair, but the face wasn't his. It was waxy and pale, like a mannequin, with empty, lifeless eyes staring back at me. It was almost like someone had tried to make it look like him, but they hadn't gotten it quite right. My legs felt like jelly, but before I could back away, I noticed something else, a piece of paper pinned to the chest of the thing sitting in the chair. The handwriting was familiar, the same shaky scrawl from the first letter. It said, "He's still alive, for now." I stumbled back, the flashlight slipping from my hand and clattering to the floor. The sound echoed through the basement, louder than it should have been, and in the pitch-black silence that followed, I heard something I'll never forget. A click, the sound of a door locking. I scrambled to grab the flashlight, my hands fumbling in the dark, and aimed it at the stairs. The basement door was closed. "Hello?" I called, my voice breaking. There was no answer. Then the chair creaked. I whipped the flashlight back around, aiming it at the mannequin thing in the chair, but it hadn't moved. Not yet. The creaking wasn't coming from the chair itself. It was coming from behind it. There was another door. It was set into the back wall, a heavy steel thing with no handle, just a small rectangular window covered by a sliding hatch. I hadn't noticed it before because it blended into the concrete, but now it felt like the only thing in the room. As I stepped closer, my legs shaking so badly I could barely walk, I realized the metallic smell was stronger near the door, almost overwhelming. I reached out and slid the hatch open. At first, all I saw was darkness. My flashlight barely penetrated the small rectangular window, but then I noticed something moving in the shadows. It was a person. "Mike?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The figure twitched at the sound of my voice, jerking its head toward me. I could barely make out the shape of him through the little window, but I knew it was him. I could feel it. "Mike!" I said louder this time. "It's me! Are you okay?" He didn't answer. His movements were jerky, unnatural, like his body didn't know how to work anymore. I could hear his breathing now, shallow and wet, like every inhale was a struggle. "Mike, talk to me," I begged. Then, in a voice that didn't sound like his at all, he whispered, "You shouldn't have come here." Something slammed into the door, shaking it so hard I stumbled backward. Mike, or whatever was left of him, was throwing himself against the steel, screaming now, this guttural, inhuman sound that didn't belong in this world. I turned and bolted for the stairs, not caring how loud I was or what I knocked over on the way. When I reached the top, I yanked on the door, but it wouldn't budge. Locked. "Let me out!" I screamed, pounding on it with both fists. "Please, let me out!" Behind me, the banging on the steel door grew louder, more frantic. The sounds coming from Mike were worse now, a horrifying mix of screams and choking noises that made my entire body feel like it was on fire. I didn't care about being quiet anymore. I slammed my shoulder into the basement door over and over, ignoring the pain, ignoring the fact that the frame barely even shook. And then As suddenly as it started, the banging stopped. The silence was worse. I turned back, the flashlight beam shaking violently as I aimed it toward the steel door. The hatch was open. I don't know how it happened, I hadn't touched it, but now it was just hanging there, swinging slightly. Something moved in the darkness beyond it. Not Mike, something bigger. My flashlight started to flicker. No, not now, I muttered, shaking it desperately, but the light went out completely, plunging me into total darkness, and that's when I heard it. A voice, not Mike's, not even human. It came from everywhere and nowhere all at once, low and distorted, like a broken recording on an old cassette tape. You opened the door. Now you're part of it. The next thing I remember is waking up in my car. I don't know how I got there, or how long I'd been sitting there. The sun was coming up, and my phone was on the passenger seat with a new notification. It was from Mike. The message said, "Don't come looking for me." I don't know who or what sent that message, but I haven't heard from him since. I moved out of my house the next day, ditched my phone, and wiped my laptop. I haven't been back on the dark web since. Hell, I barely use the regular web anymore, but no matter where I go, I can't shake the feeling that someone's watching me. Every night, I check my windows and lock my doors. I keep the lights on until the sun comes up. And every morning, I find another envelope sitting on my porch. Always the same message. You should have stayed home.